Good evening, respected senior comrades, my dear young friends. Thank you, Center for Financial Accountability, and especially Comrade Franco, for conducting this webinar in these times when it has the maximum relevance and giving me the opportunity to speak. Thank you. Friends, the banking space has changed drastically in this technologically advanced world. To understand the envisaged change in India, we need to see around the world. Especially this pandemic situation would give a deja vu feeling to people well versed with technological advancements in banking space, especially in the Asian region. I would share the story of China with you. In 1993, 10 years before the 2003 SARS pandemic, the Chinese government's Golden Projects laid an important foundation for online payments. The Golden Bridge project built the internet networks. The Golden Card project established a UPI system. And the Golden Customs project linked customs points to a national electronic data interchange system. And this promoted paperless trade. When SARS hit China in 2003, the basic infrastructures were in place for digital payments to start to grow. And I'm quoting a research paper, nearly 67 million people, or 5.2% of the population, had access to the internet, and 500 million payment cards were in circulation. SARS epidemic in 2003 expedited China's path in launching digital payments and e-commerce in the country. Regulators put little red tape in the way of online payment companies, which essentially worked as a regulatory fintech sandbox in China. And the government did not promulgate the regulations governing mobile payments until 2010, about 7 years after Alipay's launch, allowing Alipay to initially operate in an environment with little regulation. It also updated a previously clunking interbank payment system to an advanced e-commerce rapid development. China's experience with the SARS epidemic in 2003 helped launch digital payments and e-commerce in the country. SARS forced what would become a permanent shift in behaviors. Consumers holed up in their homes, had to turn to previously untrusted e-commerce sites, while Chinese company adopted e-commerce for sales because people refused to meet in person. Alibaba launched Taobao that year, its first consumer-facing e-commerce website. And soon after, they created Alipay to help solve payments and trust problems that inhibited the growth of online shopping. So Chinese e-commerce and online payments experienced symbiotic growth in the aftermath of SARS. So initially, the Chinese platform could not just accept credit card for online payments. So the penetration was a bit low. Cash payment upon delivery was also a popular option, but not a virus-proof one. So transforming from cash upon delivery to modern mobile payment upon delivery system took cooperation between range of stakeholders beyond just fintech entrepreneurs. Banks were cooperative, and the government focused on building crucial infrastructure in the areas of identity, internet access, and legacy payment systems, all while encouraging domestic online payments and digital commerce through light touch regulations. China's move towards a cash note light society. I'm using the word cash light, not cash less. So China's move towards a cash light society helped to sustain the quarantines and the will as the economy restarts. Now coming to another crisis that has shifted technological tectonic plates to bring about an earthquake in the banking sector, the 2008 financial crisis. It did not just usher in an era of consolidation and low rates that reshaped the banking industry globally. It also coincided with the mass adoption of the smartphone and shift to digital banking. After the crisis, a crop of web-first lenders emerged to challenge the world's biggest banks and made offering end-to-end mobile banking features a matter of survival. And now, the ongoing coronavirus pandemic has only affirmed that there is no looking back. And how the biggest banks in the world are responding? In China, nowadays, 70% of the payments that Citigroup handles for customers are done through Alipay, The payments business spawned by Alibaba. Citigroup's digital payments technologies are also present on other popular social media platforms like Line and WeChat that are popular in China. Citibank recently launched a credit card partnership with the fintech Paytm in India. And in Singapore, it uses chatbots on Facebook Messenger to help answer customer service inquiries. In November last year, Citibank made a big splash in US by unveiling a digital checking account with Google Pay. Banking had changed irrevocably as a result of the pandemic. The pivot to digital has been supercharged. Jane Fraser, the president of the Citigroup and CEO, he has recently said, "We believe we have the model of the future, a light branch footprint, seamless digital capabilities, and network of partners that expand their reach to hundreds of millions of customers." So the penetration of the internet and the penetration of the smartphones created a window of opportunity. Not only China and not only Citibank, digital upstart Nubank, NUBANK, is the top rated bank in Brazil, beating out an oligopoly of legacy banks on the list. Its CEO David Vélez said, even as a startup, we could compete head to head with the big banks. Suddenly, you did not need billions of dollars to build bank branches, and you did not need hundreds of millions of dollars to buy mainframes from IBM. You could use the internet to acquire customers. Never were these growing demands more important than during the coronavirus pandemic, which forced countries around the world to announce lockdowns to combat the spread of virus. Unable to visit the branches, consumers are turning to mobile apps and online services to get the transaction done. Now is the time when known standard forms of work will be the future. Known standard forms of work. And the banks will have to adapt it. Digital gig economy is the new word we will be hearing more often. In gig economy, temporary, flexible jobs are commonplace, and companies tend toward hiring independent contractors or freelancers instead of full-time employees. A gig economy undermines the traditional economy of full-time workers who rarely change positions and instead focus on a lifetime career. In India, we have witnessed the surge in digital payments. If you think about the growth of UPI over the past year, a lot has been driven by improved ease of use, which has been delivered by the fintechs also. Much of the transaction growth to date has been peer-to-peer payments, previously made in cash. Now much of its results are due to Google Pay, Paytm, and PhonePe. These companies are spending quite a lot of money in advertising in order to capture the market. While they currently account for most transactions on UPI platforms, there are 350 million unique WhatsApp users in India. And when WhatsApp moves from beta to a full launch, it will open up a completely new market. And the peer-to-merchant transaction is also gaining momentum. Our SMEs are trying to understand the benefits of digital payments, and they are accepting it. With the launch of UPI 2.0 last year, the platform is attracting a healthy share of merchants into its fold. So to be sure, digital payments do not come without costs. Data privacy remains a major concern in many countries. The wide adoption of digital payments also creates issues for populations who are less tech savvy or who lack resources to purchase devices that could support digital payments. Here, India has the real challenge, and the government should leverage on the trusted network of the public sector banks to drive this change. Why PSBs? Well, the core value and sole motives of the public sector banks as envisioned is trust and service and not profit and revenue alone. We cannot have a digital transformation by sacrificing trust and security of the citizens. Let us be wary of the fact that we are still a developing economy and there are still areas in our countries with limited access to technologies and institutional education. This forced digitalization won't lead us anywhere. I would end with 3 major factors that we need to consider when it comes to digital transformation in a country like ours. First, cyber education to be a part of the curriculum in schools along with physical education, value education, sex education. We would be wary of the pitfalls of the digital, which is the large number of first-time users who are not digital natives. There is a massive piece around consumer education, just making sure that users follow the necessary protocols. 2, use PSBs as the vehicles to drive the change with stronger regulations for the private players. My friends in another half of this webinar would talk more about fintechs. Third is the technology aspect, which banks and fintechs must address. High-end machine learning capabilities can now be deployed for fraud identification and mitigation. Today, at many financial institutions, fraud detection in these channels remains highly compartmentalized. Looking for any weakness in a system that can be exploited, these days, cyber criminals turn to social engineering. They do not hack the system, they hack the person instead. To illustrate with a small example, UPI today gives the merchant a collect option, where the seller will send a message to collect funds from a customer. And if you authenticate that collect request by clicking on OK, your account is debited. And if it is a debit of 50 or 100 rupees, the consumer may not even bat an eyelid. Okay, I have been scammed, but that is all right. So I would end here with a note that the future is going to change really quick for the banks post-COVID. And as trade union organizations, as the bankers of the future, we need to be wary of these changes and ready for the transformation. So comrades, I end my address with this, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to open the webinar and opportunity to speak. Thank you all.